Hey, welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of raising a family. What are we talking about? The realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, clearly. I'm Mackenzie
Mm.
Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator sometimes.
Sometimes, and also the reality of podcasting.
You know that.
Yes. And I'm Lindy Buckingham Shutt. I'm a professor of human nutrition, guest co host, and mom to one sweet angel baby and one young ravenous eater.
All right, we love it. Well, we are here in season 10 talking all about kids and food, Lindy's specialty. We've been loving all her expertise. And last week, remember, we talked about feeding styles, right? The things that that is one thing that influences why we eat what we eat and why our kids eat what they eat. But also, we learned about the division of responsibility for feeding, which I love so much and have been working on practicing with my kids. So, we're going to continue on this topic of kids and food, right, Lindy?
Yes, yes, we are. So, again, last week we talked about those feeding styles, so more of those attitudes, beliefs around eating, feeding our kids. But today we're going to talk about specific practices. So, these are actual behaviors, these are actions that parents can do. Some of those strategies that you can put into play, maybe not as abstract as feeding
Yeah.
styles. These are actual
hmm
feeding practices.
Right? Well, the things we actually do and say and stuff is going to mix in there. And it's kind of interesting. So, right? So, Lindy, of course, helped me find all the research, helped us find the research for this season. And in the report that she shared with me, yeah, they talked about really this idea of food practices. The research really kind of like got started in the 90s. So, it's not like it's been around forever. It's kind of like our generation of parenting, that is kind of new to this whole having information about food parenting practices.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And this is always, emerging research. I think anytime we talk about nutrition, food research, there's always
Mm.
going to be something new. But this healthy eating research report that we keep referencing, which is a report that put together recommendations from a lot of experts in the area of feeding kids, uh, references particularly this one article by Vaughn and his colleagues about food parenting practices.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about those today, but the definition for those is
Yes.
the intentional or unintentional behaviors and actions performed by parents that influence what their kids eat and their behaviors and actions around food.
I love that it says intentional or unintentional, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, what are feeding parenting practice or food parenting practices? Obviously, it's what parents do, but also what they don't mean to do, but do,
Yes.
but do.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe today we'll teach you how to have some more intentional
Ooh,
practices.
yeah. Yes,
Yes.
we'll get intentional with these behaviors and actions performed by us as parents.
That sounded dirty for some reason. I don't know. I
All
don't
right, I
know.
would like to redact that. I would like to take that back.
Oh.
So, what about these three dimensions? So, this article or this report kind of breaks these down, and the research in general, right? Not just this report. When it's looking at these food parenting practices, it says there's three main kind of components or categories of these practices, right?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the three dimensions of food parenting practices and then actually some specific practices within those three dimensions.
Yeah.
So, those three dimensions are structure, second is autonomy support, and then the third is coercive control. So, we're going to talk about those, but I
Mm.
want to make sure I preface this conversation with saying that all of those practices are informed or determined by a couple things that you have as a parent. So those are your own abilities, your own attitudes and beliefs. So
For sure.
maybe those feeding styles, your own knowledge, but then also your own like the resources you have as a parent.
hmm
So how much time you have, what money do you have to spend on this food, those types of things as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that we know that everybody, even the stage of life, we could have kids of similar ages, but are doing different things, or because we have different jobs, or because of where we live, or all these different things can affect what we're going to actually do when we're feeding our kids, or even where we get our food.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thinking about some families get food at the grocery store, some get it at the gas station, some get it at the food pantry, some receive donations, some might eat with family and friends because they're not having regular access to food right now. They're kind of in transition. And yes, this looks so different for everybody. I think that's a really important place for us to start. Of like, yeah, it would be simple if all of us had access to every ideal situation. That's not the reality all parents are going to be operating from.
Yeah. Yep. So we're going to talk about the
Mhm.
practices. We're going to talk about those broader dimensions, and then hopefully you can figure out what best practices you can put into place and what fits for your family.
Yep. Oh, fits for your family. You said it better than I did when I opened. Yeah, and I think a great. I loved walking through this with you. The thinking about it almost kind of as a toolbox. So as you think about what practices that you have available to you when you're feeding your kids, okay, I might pick up this one. I might use this one regularly. This one doesn't fit right now, but maybe will later. And I loved this idea of just like, okay, there's lots of different things mixed in here that you can tap into. Some that I was like, okay, doing that one. All right, doing good. And then some that I was like, I could work on that one. Like there's room for improvement for our family. And so I think this look at it as a toolbox. You can learn some things, put them in your food practices, parenting toolbox, and it's okay if you leave some for later.
Mhm. Yep.
Mhm. So let's
Yes.
start with the first one, which will kind of they're not really in an order. The first one I would like to talk about structure, that idea of structure. So what are we talking about? We're talking about structure as a food parenting practice.
Yes. Okay. So the formal definition that we're going to work around is structure is the organization of children's environments to facilitate children's competence to engage in healthy behaviors and avoid unhealthy behaviors. Okay. So, really, what we're talking about is creating routines, providing consistency in the
hmm
atmosphere and the amounts and types of food that are available, putting structure into place in those type of ways.
Yeah, so really this is like that abstract, right? Abstract structure, not necessarily like four walls, right?
Yes.
Like
Yep.
or
Mhm.
like yeah, structure like the structured high chair or
Yes.
but
Yeah.
the abstract like guidelines and expectations, both like what our kids can come to expect, right? And what we expect and is like I mean, regular practice is kind of what I want to go with. I feel like it's kind of a synonym for routines. So
Yes.
maybe that's just a place to start. So one tool, one form of structure is this idea of like meal and snack routines, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's an important one for a lot of different reasons, but you know, and it could look. We talked about this. So it could look different from for different families, for different
hmm
parents, but broadly speaking, it's providing consistency, predictability around meals and snack times. So it could be where you eat, what time you eat, who you're eating with. What kind of how you're dialoguing during those meals, and then also just what is distracting you from those meals. So a routine encompasses a lot here.
Oh yeah. One of the things you said, yeah, of like who's present. This was actually an area that I feel like we've grown into a little more. Shared before on the podcast that I have anxiety. I was diagnosed with it during the pandemic, and one of my littlest was like not even one yet. And so meal times were noisy. Like
Mm,
I had a not even 1 year old and like a 3 year old ish, 3 or 4. And like one would be leaning on me from the side on the arm I'm trying to eat with, and the other one is like banging on the high chair and like happy babbling. But one of the functions of my anxiety, like one of the symptoms, was really bad overstimulation.
mm,
And so before I was like diagnosed and really like getting treated with it, I was like walking out of dinner all the time because I couldn't be there without like losing it. So I just like have to go sit on the front steps for 10 minutes while my children are like happy and playing like just happy kids at dinner, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, get me out of here." And so it came to a point of like, okay, I could stay at the dinner table, like I got on some medication and learned some new strategies for dealing with it. And then it was like, okay, but I wear earplugs. So I'm here. I am physically present at the table. That was progress for us. I
mhm,
can stay at the table now. And then it's slowly morphed into, okay, now I'm like, things are a lot more managed. I've learned a lot more strategies. I've learned some boundaries for me. Like, okay,
mhm.
it's not, doesn't work well for me for my kids to sit in my lap while I eat. I need space while I eat so I don't feel so overstimulated. And it's just like, yeah, for a long time, the idea of like who's present at dinner wasn't always me. Like,
Yeah,
wasn't always me. And so I think I just want to put that out there that, like, oh, it's all right, right? We can have room for growth. And yeah, that's I mean, basically 2 years in the making from me
mhm,
going from like, "Yeah, I can't stay at the dinner table with my kids," to like, "Yeah, now we can converse." And sometimes it's still stressful and it's still whatever, but the goal, right? It wasn't the regular practice at the time, but we've worked towards the goal of being like, okay, we're present and that it's a
Mhm.
pleasant environment and that it's, yeah, we got in the routine. We had the routine part of like, we tend to eat around this time. We tend to
Yeah.
eat in this place. But yeah, there's lots of room for growth in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you you taking yourself out into that situation and maintaining that dinner atmosphere, that dinner space, that meal space as a
Hmm.
positive, warm environment is also something that is an
True.
encouraging way to support healthy eating.
Yeah, and then that was a big part of it. Yeah, I didn't want to lose it on my kids who were just existing, right? Like just doing their thing. And yeah, so I guess that's true. I haven't always thought of it that way as like a I was kind of preserving that space and if I was having a hard time being positive in that space that I needed to leave it so that I could stay. You just like empowered me. That is my new story about that. That is my new
Yeah.
version of that story is that like yeah, I was preserving that like positive meal space.
Yes.
All
And
right, so
you were modeling appropriate probably behaviors too, which is another
yeah.
another that we can talk about within structure, right?
Yeah, yeah. So modeling, I mean, most of us knowing modeling basically like monkey see, monkey do, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Modeling how you want your kid to eat is
Mhm.
incredibly important because kids in general are influenced a lot by how others eat. This is
Mhm.
as we think about kids aging and developing as they get older. Even peer modeling is going to be
Yes.
really important to how they eat. But as you, as a parent, as a food parenting practice, you can participate in modeling. So trying new foods, trying a variety of foods. This has actually been shown to help with greater food acceptance,
Mm.
which is something I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more when we talk about picky eating, right?
Mhm.
Um, but just showing them, modeling that behavior for them is really important.
Absolutely. And that yeah, the whole idea of okay, but do what I say, not what I do, right? That we sometimes I mean, sometimes joke about, but we hope is true like, "Oh yeah, pop's not good for you." Right?
Yep. Hmm.
And we that can be the case, but knowing that one of the strategies of that structure is the modeling that we provide, whether intentional or unintentional
Yes.
modeling. Yes. And then another one being guided choices. And I liked that term of like guided as parents that we get and choose like these are the options I'm willing to make available.
Hmm.
Or I have the ability to make available to my kids and that this is guided. I'm going to try to make sure when we are choosing our food that we try to get some kind of variety, whether that's like a can of carrots is great, like something from the freezer, something fresh, whatever we have access to. But that way you're choosing a variety of food groups and a variety of foods for our kids to try. And these are the options I provide, right? That offering that structure, it's not free for all, right?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Guided
Yeah.
choices.
Guided choices. I think this is important when we think about that division of responsibility again, right? Like,
Mhm.
what are we responsible for? Well, we're responsible for when, where, what they eat. So this is that option, not whether they eat it, but like this is an
Mhm.
opportunity to guide them and say, okay, well, this is the options on the table. Um, this is what you can offer to eat, and then encouraging and guiding. We'll talk about that when we get to autonomy support, but really guiding those choices. So a couple strategies within this would be yes, providing choice for them,
Mhm.
guiding them by offering them a food that they love, but
Mhm.
offering it with a new food. So I think you
Mhm.
have some very good examples of this, Mackenzie, right? That
Oh,
the
thanks. Yeah, my one that has been in our house like a fruit that we don't eat all that often, honestly sometimes just like something seasonal. And but the like, "Oh, pears and ketchup. That is an interesting combination you have there. Love that you're trying new foods."
Yes, yeah. So, guiding them in that choice, but then also not yeah, yucking their yum as I've heard you say.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And that one's a big one in our house. That is like a value I have around food is like you can not prefer a food, right? You can not like a food. You're totally allowed to have those preferences, but like you don't get to call food gross. Like
Mhm.
food, we are grateful to have it, and it's okay to say no, thank you. I'm not saying be grateful, you have to eat it, but like, but we don't refer to food as gross. And yeah, that it could be someone else's like, oh, that's delicious. well, it's unkind to call it gross if they like it. Like,
Yeah. Mhm.
so that's one
Mhm.
of our values around food. So
Yes.
lots of things here in structure that kind of abstract how we organize and set that environment, right?
Yeah, yeah. Another one that I think is important to talk about when we're talking about even food environments. So
Mm-hmm.
what we're surrounding our kids with is talking about what food's available for them to eat in your home.
Mm-hmm.
What how is it accessible for them to eat, and then how are you preparing it? Are you preparing it with them? So if we first talk about food availability, this is where encouraging parents to try to have food in their home that again you want your kids to eat. So if you want your kids to eat more vegetables, then trying to make those vegetables available for them to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving to accessibility, really talking about how are they, do they you have it on a shelf that they could freely go and pick it if they wanted to, if you're giving them the
Mm-hmm.
option, or is it prepared and accessible for them to go and get and eat, that kind of thing.
Yes, one thing that yeah, I didn't really think of it necessarily as access before, but prior to us doing like the breakfast box scenario, I had a drawer in the fridge that was like, this is all fair game. For like to eat for a breakfast or to eat for a snack. And part of it was I found that my kids were naturally going to the pantry, which is where we tended to have more sugary, like more sweets, more of that
Mhm.
kind of stuff, like processed. And I was like, well, sometimes I want to be able to put string cheese, but that's not in the pantry. Or I want to offer yogurt, and so I just moved, even if it was typically a pantry food. I was like, this is the place you come to get your stuff. This is the place
Mhm.
where the snacks are, that you have access to. And it was just like, okay, this is the family rule for now, that it was all fair game. And part of that was just changing where they accessed food so I could offer different choices. And yeah, that I didn't really think of it before, but yeah, that was access. It's
Yeah.
changing how they access it.
Well, it sounds like you made it in some ways more maybe appealing too, which is I mean, for anybody it's
Yeah.
important, right? To make however you're going towards it more appealing or even talking
Hmm.
about it in appealing ways.
Mhm. I think of the pretty pictures of, like, the pretty rice bowls or the pretty smoothie bowls, or I feel like bowls are a thing. Is that a thing? And I feel like that's a trend, different kinds of bowls, but they're always pretty in the picture. But once you're eating it, right? If I'm, like, mixing my rice bowl with all my stuff together, it's not pretty once it's mixed, so we leave it unmixed when it's served.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
because you want the appeal.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we love appealing food.
Mhm.
Appealing food often costs more money, which I don't know if it's
Mm.
different, but I think we'll get into this when we talk about picky eating. But another
Mhm.
way, a strategy for picky eaters or better food acceptance is maybe try. I don't know if anyone's tried putting toothpicks in food for especially picky
Mm.
eaters and creating more of a it's on a toothpick or something.
Yeah, like some novelty, some
Mhm,
newness, excitement to it.
mhm,
I love
yeah,
that. Awesome. All right. So, structure, kind of that organization, the environment, the atmosphere we create. Now, what about autonomy support? That's a
yes.
different one, right? Kind of, we use the word autonomy sometimes, kind of like independence, choice, etc. Tell us about that.
Yeah, autonomy support. So, this by definition is supporting the child's developing psychological autonomy and independence by supporting of the child's self-feeding skills, engagement with food, choice, and preferences, and nutritional knowledge. Okay, so a lot. So,
Yeah,
it's
technical.
very technical. So, essentially, providing encouragement and support to help um, your child be a more independent eater and really internalize those healthful eating behaviors.
Mm, love that. And so, yeah, the things that are going to promote choice, right? That sounds very authoritative. That
Hmm.
sounds very responsive in
Hmm.
that like responsiveness column of things for when we think about those styles. So, this could be things like, I mean, one thing on the list here from this report says like encouragement and praise, right?
Hmm.
So, like encouraging our kids to try something or encouraging them to experiment with their food or encouraging them, like, oh, yeah, maybe you're going to take a sniff instead of
Yeah.
take a bite, like, but encouraging our kids in a positive way. So that's different than like manipulating or pressuring, right? But like that positive encouragement so that it's a positive experience. And then right alongside that, it also talks about praise. Getting excited about the pear and the ketchup because it was a pear. Like, yeah, I love that you tried that. That was awesome. What'd you think? Or just that kind of praise around, I noticed you seemed full and you stopped. Or I
Mhm.
noticed you were still hungry and you asked for more. I love when you listen to your body.
Mhm.
Whatever that sounds like, but that we're encouraging with that positive, right? Like the child still makes the choice, but that we're offering positive encouragement.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, anything we can do to help, again, help support that internalization, that wherever they're being motivated to eat that healthy food.
Hmm. All right. Well, what's another one here? What about reasoning? What about
Reasoning.
reasoning as autonomy support?
Yeah, I think reasoning is important to help a child understand, build that competence, that awareness, that understanding about what they're eating. So, providing some explanation around why we're eating this, or what's the benefit of eating this, those types of things. And I think it goes along well with encouraging, right? So,
Hmm.
encouraging someone to eat something because it makes you feel a certain way, or maybe don't eat it because it makes you feel a certain way.
Hmm. I even think of like my mom saying we would eat something that she grew up eating. I was like, this like isn't very good, mom. Like, I don't like this, right? And but that when the response was something like, this meal brings me joy because my mom used to make it for me when I was sick, right?
Mhm,
Or like this meal is sentimental to me, or I think this is important because it helps our body grow, or this was a really good meal for what we could afford this week.
mhm,
But offering like age appropriate reasoning for food. I mean, for any parenting decision, but for food too, it tracks.
mhm. Yes, yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Another one that it says here is child involvement.
Child
Tell me about
involvement.
what that might look like.
So I think that, it could look like a lot of things. I could look it could look like involving your child in every step of the eating, feeding process. So all the way from, if you a gardener, if you grow your own food, doing that with your kids so they start to understand, oh, this is where food comes from. So maybe get to that
Mhm.
little bit of reasoning part, but having your child come to the store with you, go to wherever you get your food and
Mhm.
help you pick out that food. So really building that, oh, I picked out this food. I got it home. It's available for me. I want to eat it because I picked it out.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I think preparing food with your kids is a really important and positive way, so they feel invested in. I made this food. I want to eat this food. Um,
Mhm.
so there's lots of great tools out there for your kid to help you prepare food. So age appropriate knives, cutting boards. My son actually for his early first birthday present just got what we call a kitchen helper, where it's like a little, I don't know.
Like climb like the tower to stand at the counter?
Yeah, I was gonna call it a little prison to stand at the
Oh.
counter, but but it's
Safety,
containing
a little safety
safety, a little
structure.
safety structure to keep him at the counter with me. But yeah,
Oh,
no,
that's
yeah.
awesome though. And so yeah, whatever that involvement looks like for you as a parent. I think of like I have friends who are like, yeah, it'd be cool if my kid would help me cook, except for I would hate that. Right? They're like, I am
Yeah.
type A in the kitchen. I don't like the mess. I don't like that is not a fun experience for me. I don't really and it's like, okay, that's okay. You don't have to give your kids that. Maybe a child involvement is helping set the table. Maybe a child involvement is helping you choose the menu for the week. Maybe it's going to wherever you're getting your food with you. And so figuring out what that looks like. And I even think child involvement with, we're talking a lot about younger kids, but older kids too,
Oh yeah.
right? I remember as a teen, I was kind of in charge of like one meal a week that I was supposed to like help choose what it was, like what we were having, help choose what did we need from the like where we were going to get our food in order to make it, those ingredients. If I needed to get something out of the freezer, to like prepare it. And yeah, and then I was in charge of cooking and all of that. And it was like, okay, that was the night I was involved in doing that. And it also helped build some of those skills for me that I needed to become like an independent adult.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's
Hmm.
very important, and it moves, you kind of even referenced, I think, this whole part of involvement in, whatever process it is. It also moves into structure. So if you talk about meal
Mm,
planning, that's a way to provide some routine and
yes.
structure if we meal plan and things like that.
Mhm. And I would say in our current stage of life, I we're about 50%.
Hmm.
Typically, we have 1 week where it's like, "Okay, this is the plan. These are the ingredients we need. This is the stuff we have on hand. This is what we're gonna yeah, like, yada, yada." And then the second week is like, "Well, I mean, I think there's something in the fridge." Like, "Ooh, maybe we have milk. Maybe well, okay, we might have to get by without." Uh, but so figuring out what that structure can look like. What is a way that makes sense for you with your strengths and resources to offer
Hmm.
it. And same thing with thinking about that involvement. With your strengths and resources, what does child involvement look like?
Yes, yes.
Mhm. And then there's one more category here, which I mean, I feel like is the one for you to speak to. It talks about one option for autonomy support is offering nutrition information and knowledge and education to our kids. Tell us about that one.
Oh yeah. I mean, obviously I'm going to be invested in learning about this, but again, helping kids kind of goes back to the reasoning. If we're providing them understanding about the benefits of why they're eating what they eat and why they're making those decisions, they might be more likely to make the healthy choice or make the choice that you want them to make.
And I even think we went through this. I had one of my kids was like having trouble going to the bathroom for a while and talking about like, okay, we're gonna have more fruits. We're gonna work on having more fruit. We even did like some prune juice, but it was talking about how that food functions, like how that
Mhm.
food helps our body function, as opposed to like we eat this because it you must, right? Because I say so, because it's like, yeah, food does help us with certain things in our bodies. And we can understand that. And that's a good thing to be able to pass on to our kids.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, think about you
Mhm.
as an adult. How do you feel when you know a little bit more about your food? Are you feeling a
Mhm.
little bit more, confident that you and competent that you can make those healthy decisions?
Absolutely. Okay, and then there's a third category or dimension here called coercive control. So there was autonomy support, structure, and coercive control. Tell us about that one.
Okay, so coercive control is definition here parents pressure, intrusiveness, and dominance in relation to child's feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, specifically around
Mm.
food.
So sounds a little more maybe of the style of like authoritarian, right?
Yes, controlling. Very, I mean, control is in
Mm.
there. It's a controlling.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. And so a few strategies are that are kind of mixed in here. And some of these are ones that research is telling us aren't so helpful, right?
Mhm.
That don't help guide our kids to be healthy, independent eaters. One of the ones that I feel like is common, I mean, that I've even like practiced semi recently is this idea of like threats and bribes around
Mhm.
food. But that is like a manipulation that is about control, isn't it?
Oh, it's about control and really what it's doing, what you're trying to control. And again, I think a lot of people try to control from this really positive place where, oh, if I
Yes.
control and tell you what to eat, then I'm doing the right thing as a parent
Hmm.
because you're gonna eat, I
Like what I
assume there's
said.
a direct line, like you're gonna eat what I'm gonna eat.
Yes.
But really it's counterproductive in the way that you're potentially um, pairing bad connotations or bad
Mm.
habits with a food. So when we think about bribing someone for food, to say if you eat the rest of your food, or if you eat, Clean Play Club, if you eat all of your
Yes.
food, then you get dessert, right? So what you're
Mhm.
doing is you're tying, you're making that you're saying that you get this reward. So the reward being the dessert
Mhm.
for the good thing. Our reward's
Yeah,
good,
the
right?
dessert's good. Yeah.
Yeah, for finishing the rest of your food, or let's say specific food you want them to eat. Again, broccoli is just the one I always go to. You eat this yucky, ooh, bad food, broccoli,
Mm.
and you get this reward, ooh, this good food for for eating the bad thing. So what
Mhm.
you're
And
doing is you're just
yes.
reinforcing this idea that there's this reward.
Mhm. And that food is tied to, right? Like that food is tied to that, and that food yeah, when we're using bribes and yeah, bribes especially teaching our kids that like food is there's good foods and then there's foods you have to tolerate.
Hmm.
And yeah, when we do that with and whatever it might be, I also think like we've used, right? I think of like we're potty trained and like
Hmm.
the M&M, like, oh, you went on the potty, you get a fruit snack. You went on the potty, you get this. And it is like a we're trying to control your behavior instead of just encourage. We want to encourage the potty training behavior, but we want it to be intrinsic, right? I don't
Mhm.
want you to stop using the potty when I stop giving if we stop giving M&Ms kind of thing, which
Yeah.
eventually you have to. No one's going to give you an M&M for the rest of your life every time you use the bathroom.
Wouldn't that be nice
uh,
if there's an M&M dispenser
like,
outside
oh,
of like every
like I
bathroom? Yeah.
did it. But that, yeah, that also the idea of, I think of, I feel like I don't hear it as often now, but like this idea of like going to bed without dinner. Like you were naughty, like you don't get to eat.
Mhm.
And we don't want our kids like that creates kind of complicated feelings around food, right, Lindy?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
With those things.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think again, when especially when you're talking about restricting food
Mm,
or withholding food, things like that, it's again kind of counterproductive to what we really want, which is we want our kids to eat food, right? So
mm-hmm,
for them to grow and to develop. So I think threatening to not, like if you don't eat dinner, then you don't get a snack or something like that is a really
mm-hmm,
negative. It's negative in the fact that it's going to be counterproductive. They might end up not getting enough food then because they didn't eat their dinner and then they didn't eat their snack, or
mm-hmm,
they're going to maybe end up eating too much at snack or something like that. So
mm-hmm.
it's just it ends up not going the way you want it to go.
Mhm. Well, and I even think of like the difference in serving sizes, which I've had to really like actively
Mm.
work on serving my kids like a tablespoon. Like what? It's just like okay, that is how much you can start with, and it's less overwhelming to start with that amount, and all those things. And then thinking about, yeah, if we're not paying attention or if maybe someone else gets my kid's plate, that if it's like a heaping serving and if the rule is just always clean your plate, if the rule is always just the pressure to finish or whatever, that's not them listening to their body. And that might be them overeating and then not feeling so good.
Oh yeah.
Um, or if, yeah, if the dessert is always, okay, well, you have to get through the supper to get to the yummy, good dessert reward. So one thing we've worked on is like, oh, you'd like to have right now, we might choose ice cream. Like, oh, we'd like to have some ice cream if we have that available. And either serving it alongside the meal or like talking about it. Like, if we'd like to also have ice cream with this, we want to save room for it or we want to, and like acknowledging, I do that. Like, right, if
Hmm.
I know I'm going to be going somewhere, sometimes it's like, oh, I need to eat something, but I don't want to eat too much because I want to eat later. And that process of learning to listen to our bodies, we want our kids to be able to do that too. And when we are like controlling and coercing that, we're kind of getting in the way of that instinct.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. That self regulation, the realization of when you're full, when you're not, those kind of things. And I think it's also gives you the parent an opportunity to model positive behaviors if you're not restricting or you're not threatening with bribes and
Yes.
things like that.
Mhm. And, yeah, a couple other of these kind of like opposite sides of the spectrum is, yeah, talking about that restriction, like you were saying, that's an example of control, but also the pressure to eat. Those are kind of like opposite ends of a spectrum. But I feel like that we see a lot, right? And even from, I think of
Hmm.
like the loving adult female, like the matriarch of the family, being like, oh, you didn't have enough to eat. Like, oh, you better go get seconds. Oh, nobody ate. Like, oh, nope, you're not getting seconds of that. You must not like it. Even like joking there, and it's like, "Ugh, but I'm full." Or yeah, or maybe I
Hmm.
just didn't like it. Like
Yeah.
but that pressure again can go against that instinct to listen to your body and to listen to your hunger. And I also think it can get really scary, in terms of restriction too. As parents, sometimes, yeah, maybe we have a fear of our child being obese, or we have a fear with a health condition, or something that it can result in really rigid restriction, and that can also lead to like eating disorders and things like that. And so yeah, that coercive, how can we kind of lean away from the coercive and lean more towards structure, right?
Hmm.
That's like appropriate expectation and demandingness as opposed to coercive control. Is that fair to say that they're not total opposites, but that they fall in different places on the line?
Yes. Definitely fair to say. Hmm.
Mhm. Awesome. All right. So those are the three main categories of the food parenting practices, right, Lindy?
Yes.
Autonomy support, structure, and coercive control. So those are some of the common areas there's been research around, right? In
Correct.
food parenting practices.
Yes, yes, that is correct. Yeah, there's been again what we can tell you from the research is that the coercive control is counterproductive to the development of healthy eating habits.
Mhm,
Whereas you want to see more of that support for autonomy, children's autonomy, that supportive structure to really help those healthy eating behaviors.
mhm, and that's the goal, right? When we talk about food parenting practices, I love you said it in the first episode, and I've just decided that I have also adopted it. The, like, raising healthy and independent eaters, we love that.
Hmm.
Oh, so that kind of I guess I was gonna say we always end with a strategy, but I kind of feel like they were all strategies.
Oh,
It was all
yes.
pretty concrete. So I guess that's gonna move us into our stop, breathe, talk space with our producer Mackenzie DeYoung. She comes in, asks us a question. We don't usually know what's coming. I am hoping that maybe I have a clue, but I don't. What do you got for us, Kens?
All right. So we talk a lot about how we might adjust like our parenting styles or our parenting practices around food,
Mhm.
obviously. Um, but how do we handle if we have grandparents or aunts, maybe, or other,
Says the aunt herself. She covers her face to
I
hide.
don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. How if they are, it can be on either end of the spectrum that they're overindulgent or maybe around their culture or around just their background that then they can maybe be that authoritative. Like, how do we have those conversations with them? Or do we need to have conversations with them around
Mm.
our practices around food? Did I ask that question in a way that made any sort of sense? Okay,
In general,
maybe I'm
generally,
not
I
yes,
got the
so
gist.
I think you know what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Do you
Okay.
want to know if you should be talking to you have a nephew, right?
I actually have a niece and 3 nephews.
Okay, so
Mhm.
you want to know if the parents of those need to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Maybe. Or as a parent, how do we need
Mm.
to have that conversation and or how do we have that conversation?
What do you
Ooh.
say, Lindy?
I think it's a lot of well, it's up to the parent really, but I think it depends too because I think there's a couple of different ways we could look at it. Um, there's the first one being uh, how active is that grandparent or that other caregiver in the life of your child? Is it
Mm.
an everyday kind of thing? Are they living with your family? Are they the primary caregivers outside of, whatever parent there is in your family? If that's the case, then I would say, you know, probably yes. If we talk about a lot of the things we talked about today, structure, that's routines, right? So if they're actively a part of their everyday routine, you probably want to have a conversation with them about how you want them to be feeding your child and what practices you want them to be engaging in.
Mhm.
If it's maybe every once in a while, I don't know. I think that's up to you again as a parent to allow, or maybe it's up to your child again, right?
Mhm.
To make those decisions about what they're eating, when they're eating, or not what when they're eating, but what whether they eat it
Mhm.
or not.
Mhm. I would say, yeah, I kind of was gonna go that direction too of like having conversations with your child about for me, I do like I lean into I love that Ellen Satter intuitive eating and that division of responsibility. And so, talking with my kids about, okay, you like grandma and papa, that's like a grandparent like partnership in our family that okay, grandma and papa are planning to take you here. Remember last time you had this you like didn't feel very good. Or, not in like a manipulative way, but helping them think about or prepare for
Mhm,
like yeah, if you're gonna go stay for a week or if this is every day, how they talk to you about this. And sometimes I've been as like I'll say to my child, like, well, I guess I disagree with that. Like grandma said this, and I mean, I guess I disagree. What do you think?
Mhm.
And so sometimes we have those kinds of conversations, like if someone like shares a value around food that I disagree with. But I have had some like assertive, hopefully respectful conversations with other caregivers in my children's life about like it's really important to us that our kids choose how much they eat. And that doesn't always sit well with everybody and doesn't
Mhm.
align with their feeding style. And so that's kind of a tough thing sometimes, but that ultimately you are like you're your kid's parent and you get to decide what values your family has around food. And but trying to do that in a respectful way, especially if that person's caring for your child, right? Hopefully that's someone that you respect and care about. So thinking, I mean, my interpersonal communication skills would say use an iMessage. I am concerned about what my child is eating, or I am concerned with like that I heard this, or so lots of different ways. I would say yeah, on an occasional basis, I'd probably just like, oh well, every once in a while we that happens. But yeah, if it is a regular occurrence and if it causes you a lot of concern, that means you can address it either with your child or with that person.
Yeah,
Sure.
and it doesn't mean you can't provide them some of the practices we talked about today, like positive reinforcement,
Yes.
praise, encouragement, having them be a part of the involvement in the process of whatever that looks like for you. So if your grandparent
Mhm.
loves to garden, then encourage them to go garden, but maybe
Mhm.
they're not going to be, maybe the availability to the foods you don't want them to have is going to be higher in their household, and you're going to
Yes.
have to maybe be okay with that, and if you're not okay with that, then that's a conversation that needs to be
Mhm.
had.
Tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah.
But yeah, only you and your co-parent can decide, when it needs addressing and if it needs addressing.
Sure. Sure. Well, thank you. I hope that
Better go
my
call your sister.
well, see, my problem is that I wanna be the cool aunt that, like, "Yeah, let's go get ice cream."
Uh-huh.
Mhm,
And that's great. Ice cream can be a part of what you eat.
Yeah.
mhm.
But yeah, thinking realistic and all those things. And I see naturally how like I even have gotten into this like with my in-laws and having the discussion around like, you're right, you're their grandparents. You can indulge them
Mhm,
because you don't have to like, not that you don't care about their well-being, but you don't have the same responsibility of being the parent who has to make sure that's balanced with something else, right? You
mhm.
get to be the fun because you don't have to be the heavy. And that's fine. I'm okay with my child having that in their lives,
Yeah.
as long as, like, we can respect that it's different,
Yeah.
um, and that's what makes sense for my family.
Mhm. Yeah.
All
Mm,
right. Well,
awesome.
thank you.
Oh, yes, these food parenting practices. So much good stuff. And yeah, that the research tells us when we can offer that structure, right? That environment, that atmosphere, kind of the organization, our kids know what to expect. They have opportunities to engage with it, get involved. And that leans into that autonomy support, encouraging them to have some choice, to have some ownership, and to have a positive experience around food. And then the research tells us that those coercive strategies, those rewards and bribes and restriction and pressure, that those really don't promote like healthful eating behaviors and things like that. And so there was a whole bunch of strategies here that you could kind of tap into in your toolbox, and maybe realizing that some of the tools you've had in the past, like, okay, I need to reflect on this practice and if it still makes sense for my family, or and maybe it does, and other times maybe it doesn't. And so only you get to decide that.
Mhm, definitely, and I would say grasp onto those practices you heard today that you're doing well, and yeah, try to
Mhm.
try to put some more in your toolbox if you can.
Absolutely. So what do we have coming next week, Lindy?
Oh, you're gonna love this. Okay, so next
Will
week,
I?
I think so. I don't know, but
I
we're gonna
can't
talk.
tell.
We're gonna going to look at temperament and food.
And I am so excited to get into it. So much good stuff to talk about related to temperament and food. So Lindy and my interest, and really a borrowed interest or a learned interest from Lori, her legacy lives on on temperament. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Be sure you come back next week. Don't forget that you can follow us on social media at Science of Parent on Facebook and Twitter.
So come along as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.